I'm welcoming Triple H into the room that he owns and has invited me in.
Yeah. It is weird to see a man in that room.
Yeah, there's such a difference between what a man is and then what you are, Sam.
Bob Kelly's there in New York with him, and they were just pointing out that after watching me all morning, it's really odd to see a man walk into the room.
Said, can I just say something, Sam? If you said Shazam, that's what you would turn into.
Nobody's buying that tape on Beard either.
You don't think so? So they're concerned. Bob Kelly especially.
How do I turn this down because you're screaming at me? Right
yeah, here you go. That should work.
I like that. He's told Sam, you're too loud.
You're too loud.
Yeah.
They're saying that because my hair is trimmed down from where it used to be, that I don't provide enough pizzazz
no peacocking
for NXT anymore.
Yeah, you're a little bit flat now.
Boom. Boom. He's flat. That's the word I was looking for. He's as flat as my sister.
Do you have to use like one of those man groomers, like the Manscaped things?
No, I went to a stylist to get this done.
Oof.
You know, a curly hair specialist, actually. Yeah.
Where did you get that done? A VFW?
Now I wanted to ask you, Triple H, because Sam is too shy to ask, but he's been fairly adamant about deserving to fly on the private plane. He feels that that's how he should be shuttled to and from gigs, and we would like to know if there's any chance of that happening.
I feel there's a possibility down the line of that happening, but like all these things have to happen in steps. Like right now, his travel perks are Greyhound bus. We get him the coach tab on that. Doesn't come with the bag lunch, but we'll get him to the bag lunch on the Greyhound. Move up the line eventually. You get there.
That's what I like. I like something with a lot of potential, lots of room to grow.
Room to grow. If you apply yourself like you have.
Yeah.
For most of your life, you will eventually
That's what Sam's wife does, too. Room for improvement.
He's been working on that room to grow with her for a long time.
So that plane, how long were you with the company? Because I know like flying on the plane is the big thing. Did you start immediately, or did you kind of have to be there for a couple of years before you finally started getting on that?
No, it's funny. People make a huge deal out of that plane. It is realistically the only way that we can do that from a television production standpoint is pretty much the only way that we can do what we do and get the places we need to go to. So when I was a talent, I never flew on that or anything else. From a company's standpoint, from the executives or from Vince's standpoint, to be able to get where he needs to be and get back or whatever that is, it is not. People go, oh, it must be so nice. You sit on there and you eat sushi or whatever. While you're working. It's it's an office in the air. And if anybody's ever met Vince, he doesn't stop. He's 24/7. So it's an office in the air.
Is Vince okay if people go like, oh, we just had a long night. I'm going to take a nap before I...
that doesn't happen very often. Yeah, you see a lot of people watching him. If he was to nod off, you'd see a lot of people very quickly try to take a nap. It doesn't happen that often because he's on the go all the time, and that's really what that place is a flying office.
Do you upgrade it every year, or like is it the same plane for the last 10 years?
The company's had the same plane now for a while. To be honest, I don't remember when they got the new one, but it's they've had this one for a while.
And
do you like being a boss?
Yes.
Of people, like to go from, obviously you relate to them in a different way because you're not anybody's boss.
You.
Let me just say that,
not you, Jim.
like, for example, yes, in the example of if you were telling me what to do right now, it would.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But when you're a boss, like people come up to you, like you're the person they go to. They want things. You get to deliver the good news, but you also, unless you hire somebody to deliver the bad news for you.
So, one, I don't necessarily try to look at myself as anybody's boss. I try to look at myself in the role of, this is a business where everybody has to work together to get common stuff done. That's how I see it. So it's a giant team. The point is, though, at some point in time, somebody has to make the final decision on things. So you debate a lot of things. You talk about a lot of things, and then somebody has to make the final decision. Whether popular or unpopular, you have to make the final decision, and it's got to be solid and stick to it. The truth is, nobody really understands that role until they have that role. You can think when you're in the number 2 spot, well, this is so obvious, I would do this. But when the pressure is on you to have that decision being yours and live or die by it or whatever, that's a different, the dynamic absolutely changes in the moment it becomes your responsibility. And then not second guess and do all those things. It's just the difference of even just one show where you're in the position of going along with things or presenting your ideas and thinking like, this is dumb, we should do this, be so much better or whatever. But then when that becomes your decision to make, it's a different ballgame.
Have you had moments where you've gone like, this was my decision and it didn't work, and you're like, oh shit?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Anybody that's in that position, yeah, absolutely. The truth is, you don't know if the other one would have worked better, right? A lot of times, you'll hear said in this business a lot, sometimes things are chocolate and vanilla, right? So it's all ice cream. It's all pretty good, but
right.
Like, do you want chocolate or do you want vanilla? You eat the chocolate, you go like, that wasn't really what I wanted today. But
right.
I don't know, the vanilla might not have been any better.
You find out everybody wanted strawberry anyway. So
yeah, sometimes that happens too. Yeah, it is. So.
Are you good at making decisions? Like, are you good at telling people things that you know they're not going to like? Like, some guys who are bosses are comfortable doing that. I'm terrible at it. Like, I hate telling people things that I know they're not going to like. Or are you comfortable doing that?
I think so, because I think if as long as you have logical and reasonable explanation. Now, somebody might totally disagree with you, but as long as I feel like I can defend my position of here's what I'm telling you and here's why I'm telling it to you. Like, this is what I feel should have happened, or whatever that is, whatever the reasoning is. But as long as you have that logical reason behind you, somebody might say, well, I disagree with the outcome or whatever, but okay, but here's how I got there. It's not like I just made this stuff up and decided I don't like you, so I'm going to do this.
Right.
There's a logical reason to it. And as long as you're there, yeah, then you just have to make your decision, stick by it.
But the problem is that it's not like you're at a Subway where you're telling a 14-year-old nerd. The guys you might have a problem, an argument with, are huge. Like, these are really big guys. I mean, have you ever had look, we got to do this, and they get so pissed where it gets
Bob,
heated?
I don't know if you've met Triple H. He's also got some size to him as well.
I'm looking at him. I'm looking at him next to you, so he's actually
and
bigger
that's with
now.
him really close to the camera and me far away. Our business is very professional. So you see the craziness that you see on camera and on screen and everything, but behind the scenes, obviously, there's a lot of emotion to anything you do, and passion of what we do and all that stuff. But for the most part, everybody's pretty professional, and you're just having discussions about things. And sometimes you got to tell somebody something they don't like. Other times you give them news they love. So it just depends on the day. But everybody's reasonable.
Do you like the crossover? Sorry, Sam. Do you like the crossover you guys have had with UFC? It's really interesting between Brock and Ronda, two of the biggest stars in both, have kind of worked well. I mean, Ronda went from one to the other, and Brock has kind of gone back and forth. You must be happy about that.
And Shayna Baszler, too, who was on The Ultimate Fighter.
Matt Riddle.
Is now...
Oh, right, Matt Riddle. That's right. Yeah, but he definitely doesn't
Matt
like...
Riddle was an incredible, standout UFC performer, and then, made the transition to what we do. I am a big believer in the athletes. No different than you see talent like a Baron Corbin, who, I know he gets a lot of heat, but he's a phenomenal performer. He was an NFL player, came into this a little bit later, was a fan, but then came into this a little bit later as a performer. You see Braun Strowman coming in from strongman competitions. And so you see athletes coming in from a lot of different backgrounds, but I think that's one of the things that was the goal of the Performance Center when we did this, 5 or 7 years ago, whatever it was when we started. I'm terrible with dates, but the concept of this was to create a pathway for people. I would meet people all the time in various either sporting, events or entertainment that would just say, man, I've always dreamed about doing that. I've been such a fan. I would love to do that. How do you get into it? And there was no clear path to do this. I'd meet guys that were in the NFL and think like, I got another year left, but I'm 23 or something, and I want to continue to be an athlete. And I've always dreamed of two things: NFL, I've done that, and WWE. And how can I get there? And to create that pathway for them, to create a place they could go train, just like as if they were at a D1 college or on a pro team. So that they can make that transition. I think that transition would be, I don't know that you would have seen a Ronda make that transition or people like that make the transition as successfully without that system.
And how is women's wrestling? I mean, it was, it's become huge, and it like back in the day, it wasn't as big as it was. It was always the guys, but with women like all the women. Like I just saw that movie Fighting with My Family. Like it's as big as the guys now, and as interesting for a wrestling fan. I love to watch those matches too. Like, was that something that you guys did, or was that something that just happened?
Well, no, it's something that we consciously went after, but also, you can say it's like the chicken or the egg thing, right? Like, what are fans and what is the world willing to accept? I think if you go back 20 years ago and you say there are going to be, Dana White said it at one point in time, right? There will never be women's MMA. Well, the UFC will never have women in it. And then along comes Ronda Rousey, and she captivates everybody. There was a period of time, if you go back 25 years, 30 years ago, that anybody would think that, the women's soccer team would be bigger than the men's soccer team in the U.S., or that, the world would be captivated by the female gymnast, or women's tennis would be bigger than men's. That stuff goes through transitions in what people are willing to accept. But as you're kind of watching what's happening in the world and seeing what's going on and changing how they are, it used to always, even for me as a talent, I used to always think to myself, like, man, some of these women are really talented, but we don't allow them to do what they do. And I don't know that fans would accept it, but like some of them could be really skilled. They've just never been trained right. So when I kind of came in and took over developmental, it was kind of blank slating it and saying, we're going to recruit different women. We're going to recruit athletes. We're going to train them the same way. I remember walking in here one day and saying, well, they're not allowed to do that. They're trained like this. And I was like, why?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Nobody could give me a good answer. So I was like, all right, so all that stuff goes out the window now. Here's what we're doing. And we changed it. And when you started to give them those opportunities, and you had athletes like Sasha, Becky, Charlotte, Ember Moon, and just Naomi at that time, and all these women that were in the system that just took that ball and ran with it. And you could very quickly see, like, oh, my God, when they are applying themselves to this and learning it in the same way, very quickly, they're almost more driven than the guys to prove a point, and they're knocking that out of the park. You go no further than our fans then with the Give Divas a Chance hashtag trended globally for 3 days, and they drove that process, but we were already there with it. NXT started to give them a little bit of a platform for people to see it. The fans got onto it, said this is what we want. They demanded it. We followed suit, and you have to look no further than this year's WrestleMania with Ronda, Becky, and Charlotte in the main
headline,
event.
yeah.
And not because there was a moment in time where we said, let's make them the main event and capture some headlines. It had nothing to do with that. It's because they were the main event. You can clearly look at that run into Mania and go, what was the most talked about thing? It was that match. What was the most talked about storyline? That match. What was the biggest attraction? That match.
Yeah, and it was the match the fans wanted to see the most too. That was everybody thought that's where it should be.
Yeah, are you involved in the production of, like, now you guys are doing movies and TV? Are you involved in all that too, or are you just in the wrestling side of it, the live events and the shows?
I'm in more the wrestling side of it and the live events. Clearly, I have knowledge about what's happening and all of the pieces and components that go into it from a bigger scope of what WWE is. I often say that WWE and people ask me, where is it in 10 years or 15, 20 years from now? And to me, I feel like we're at that tipping point where WWE is like a Disney or a Marvel, where it becomes less about the comic books, less about the princesses and the cartoon characters, and all of a sudden becomes this different entity that all these things, movies, television, all these different things roll into. Because at the end of the day, while what we do as a core product is in ring, we're really a giant media company that is out there promoting and doing all this other media stuff, and that's where we really excel.
And that's why Sam has to get pizzazz. He has to grow his hair back, get a silver tie, something. I mean, look at his beard and look at your beard. That beard has levels. I mean,
Yeah.
the mustache is separated from the beard. I mean, it looks great. And then your beard is just like you're a fisherman, like you're in Canada fishing for trout.
There's fishermen who like wrestling too, though.
Yeah, absolutely. But I bet they have
Fishermen
better-
want to relate.
I believe there is some fish in the beard right now.
There could be. I don't check.
Yeah, it looks like some scales.
So tonight's a big night because, Triple H was just talking about when he came over and took over developmental, which literally used to be developmental. It used to be a place where they would get people and train them how to be WWE superstars, how to go on WWE TV and perform in this way. And when you took it over, you branded it NXT, and you started to build this brand, which started to attract eyes of not people just going like, oh, I'm just curious about what's coming next, but no, I just want to watch NXT. You have some of the best athletes in the world, and you've brought it so far to a point, like WWE Network specials, a weekly television show on the network, to tonight, which is the first time that NXT is going live on USA for 2 hours in primetime in your weekly slot. So what is today like for you? I mean, this has to be an insane.
It is, yeah,
day.
and it's just been a crazy ride of doing this and thinking it's going to get to a certain point, and then it just keeps growing and growing and growing, and you're riding along with it. But it's been a methodical growth pattern, and getting where we are now, where I think, the term developmental for me, everybody in this business until the day you're out of it is developmental in some way. You're going to learn about this because crowds change, the way people want to watch change, so all that stuff shifts. So you're constantly learning in this because it's a live product. Mm-hmm. So it's going to constantly change. You're not just making a static television show that you record and put out and put a laugh track on it or something. So there's always going to be that. But I think today really marks the point for me, anyways, where NXT hits the same sort of plane as Raw and SmackDown. Is it on the same level at the exact moment? No. Is it, to the same level of knowledge or anything else? No. But this is the moment in time where there are now 3 distinct brands: Raw, SmackDown, NXT. I believe talent can go from one to the other, back and forth, and create longevity to their careers. Where, if you're in one place for 10 years, that's a long time. People seeing you doing the same thing over and over again for 10 years. The ability to go from one to the other and work with different people and do different things, reinvent yourself, all that stuff, it just creates longevity for careers. And then as that grows and you see NXT UK, as we expand globally, now we have a performance center in London. As that expands globally, you'll see more of those. So you'll see territories, for lack of a better term, around the globe where people can go and continue to grow their careers and make it longer, so that they have that, they can spend their entire arc here and have it be meaningful and in a professional way, not running out there trying to hope the guy pays you, and if I get hurt, now what,
And do you think, as far as this has expanded past developmental, that it's become a brand instead of a department, right?
Yes.
So do you think that you will still have the same level of autonomy that you've had over it as big as this thing gets? Or is Vince the type of person that goes like, look, I trust you, but you're now sending this out to millions of people. I need to have my hands on this.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question. So, the one thing that people don't give credit for to Vince is that everything in this company eventually is because of him, right? Like at this point, like if he doesn't want to do it, it isn't happening. If he doesn't see the value in it, it isn't happening. And I get that people could look at it and go, yeah, but NXT was over here, it was a network thing, no big deal. But he saw the growth, he saw everything happening, he saw the alternative nature of it, different than what Raw and SmackDown are. He understands that difference and why one works and why the other one doesn't, and what needs to be put out there for the masses and for the general population, also what needs to be put out there for more passionate, more deeper level of engagement fans. NXT is something different. It isn't necessarily what Raw and SmackDown would be, because those are the general entertainment shows. So his ability to separate and see the two is huge. Right now, there is no – he knows what makes it successful. He's like, just go make this successful, and trust me, if we did something that was tragically wrong, he would be like, what are you doing?
Right.
You know,
so he'll put his
fix
hands
that.
on if need be, but as long as it's still successful, just keep doing.
Yeah, and when I say that, that's no different than anything else in the company.
Sure.
Everything else is running in the company, but when you're at his level with all the stuff this company has going on, his view is at 100,000 feet or higher, and he's just looking at things. And if he sees something wrong, he goes, "What? I think this might be the wrong direction for us as a company." That's been since the beginning of NXT. If he sees something that he doesn't like, yeah, he's going to make a comment about it, and you either defend it or change it, right? And that's the way it's always been. But the success of this has led him to believe it's in the right direction, and it's just going. You know what I mean? It's just going. And with all the stuff we have going on, you just look at just this week alone, 7 hours of live content. That's if you don't count 205 on the network, right? So if you do, that's 8 hours of content just this week. And then there's a pay-per-view on Sunday.
And that's going to be every week going forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that's the one thing. Like I was thinking to myself the other day, I'm like, man, I've been in Orlando a bunch lately. I'm like, I better get used to that. I'll be here every week. Like,
Yeah.
It just all of a sudden it escalated rapidly. You know.
Yeah.
Well, Triple H, unlike Sam, I have total faith in your ability to run NXT. I don't think you're going to need any outside. I apologize for Sam's implying that you need help. The last time I saw you and I saw you and Stephanie, I think it was backstage at Black Sabbath.
Yes.
I think that's the last time I saw you. What's the last concert you went to?
Last concert I went to was a few weeks ago. I went to go see ZZ Top in New Hampshire. We have a place up in New Hampshire, and Billy's been a fan, and Dusty have been fans for forever. They've been coming. I've known them since probably '95, coming to events, and they're huge fans.
Great beards.
A lot of our great
They
beards.
pop. The beards pop.
It's a comment about
Yeah,
me.
no,
I think.
yeah.
I think
Yeah,
that's
a little bit.
It's a
Yeah.
shot. It's a little bit of
Yeah.
a shot.
But huge fans, been friends of ours for a long period of time. So we just went to go see them. It was a spectacular concert. Their 50th anniversary, which it's a funny thing, like Billy made a comment in the show, like 50 years, same three guys.
Wow.
Same three chords.
I've never
What's it
seen
like-
them live. That's actually one band I'd like to see live and never have.
They were phenomenal. Yeah, they were really, really good.
What's it like to collaborate with Lemmy? I mean, not just know him.
Yeah,
you know what I
well,
mean? But you actually collaborated on music for
Yeah.
yourself with Lemmy.
It was awesome. I didn't when we first did the game track that was written by Jim Johnson and the WWE. I didn't know Lem at all, so when they did it, and it was a long process of me getting to the point where they were like, "Let's get Motorhead to do this."
I mean, obviously you were a fan.
Yeah, huge,
forever. Yeah,
huge,
yeah,
and
yeah.
that was the sound I wanted. The problem was they kept recording this version of the song, and I hated it. And they would say, "What do you want it to sound like?" And I would say Motorhead, much more like Motorhead, that raw, guttural sound, like that, aggressive. And finally, they were like, "Well, we would just get Motorhead to do it," and because I didn't know that was an option. If I would have known that was an option in the beginning, I would have just said, "Let's get Motorhead to do it." And they agreed to do it, and then Lem, didn't know anything about it. They sent him video of me and pictures and stuff, and he's like, "Okay, I can make that guy." He rewrote the song, did the stuff, and recorded it. It wasn't until later we met and a couple times, and cordial and everything, and then I did a track with them on an album called Hammered for them. It's a track called Serial Killer. It's a spoken word piece. Lem called me and was like, "Hey, if we bring you out to L.A., would you do this track with me? I think our voices would sound cool, synced up together." Mm-hmm. And so I was like, "Yeah, I'll come and do it."
Of course I will, yeah.
So it was just a spoken word piece, but I sat in the studio with them for 2 days while they were making that album, and Lem had already finished all his bass tracks. So he was just there, and I was just waiting to do my stuff while everybody else, Phil was, Mickey wasn't even there. Phil was doing his guitar stuff. Lem and I just sat on a couch in this living room for like 2 straight days and just became really good friends. It's hard for me to explain the relationship because he was obviously a lot older and in a different place, but we had this relationship just where like he'd call me out of the blue, and it was like we'd been on the phone 5 minutes ago, but I hadn't talked to him in 3 months.
Isn't it interesting too what he was into? He was like a big World War II buff, like all this
my
weird
God.
stuff you'd never.
Crazy historian, World War II. He was incredibly smart. His lyrics, I think when you look at his lyrics, if you read into the lyrics, some of them are incredibly smart, some of them are incredibly tongue-in-cheek. Like,
Yeah.
he just made fun music, and he made music he liked, and but he was very, with Lem, what you saw was what he was. There was no, he didn't dress like that because that was how you were supposed to look as a rock star. That's just how he wanted to dress, and he acted a certain way, and the things he said, he had just a very simplistic way of looking at the world and life, and he had been through injuries. I remember the first thing that he said to me that really led us into having a conversation away from, because when we spoke, we hardly ever talked about wrestling, but away from music or anything else, he just said, hey, when you had your injury with your leg, he said, did you think your career was over? How'd you deal with that? Because, man, when they told me I was diabetic, I thought I was done. And, man, that really got in my head. And that started the conversation between the two of us in a different route. He would come to, like, the Staples Center. We'd be gonna have TV there or an event there. I'd get a call from Todd, or he'd leave me a message, Lem would, and say, saw you at Staples, going to stop by. I'd get message that he was there. He'd pull in his limo. He'd have our production people wait. He wasn't like a huge fan, so he would sit in the car, and then before my match would come, they'd bring him out. He'd sit in the arena. I'd put him over when I went to the ring. I'd have my match. I'd usually lose. I'd go over to him. He'd go, "You're perfect for Motorhead. You never win." and then he'd say, "I'll be in the car," and I would get done the show. I'd go shower and stuff. 2 hours later, whatever, I'd come out. Limo'd still be underneath. He'd just be sitting in a limo. Most times just him. I'd go knock on the door. I'd get in the car. We'd sit in the car, sometimes me, sometimes Regal, sometimes other people, but mostly me and him, and we'd just sit for a couple hours and just
That's awesome.
sit in the car and chat and talk about life. And he did that in London. He'd show up in London, or, if we were in town, a couple times we'd stop by the Rainbow, and he and I would just sit. And one time he had him close it down just so he and I could just sit in there and just talk. And
that life stuff has to blow your mind. Like, you have this friendship with Lemmy, and then I was watching your WrestleMania diary, and you and Stephanie are hanging out in Rick Rubin's house, like this creative genius, and you're just like, yeah, here's my process, here's how I hang out.
Yeah, and then like 10 minutes later, we're at Rick Rubin's house, and he's like, hey, come in the back. I got this kid's going to come and perform for me today, which, if you're the kid playing, is mind-blowing, right? And
yeah.
Then we walk in the back, and he's got Bob Dylan's old tour bus that he's had refurbished into a recording studio, and the whole thing is just trippy. And if you've ever met Rick, he's trippy.
Yeah.
Just surreal. There's some things like that. I'm not a big starstruck. I've never been that way. To me, people are people, and then you meet them and they're either cool or they're not. Doesn't matter what they do. And but yeah, there's it's a funny thing for me growing up. There was only certain people that I really looked at and thought oh man, that guy is something cool, like Arnold or something. And then later I did a lot of stuff with him and got to be friends with him, and just different people that have come in and out and of my life, and been extraordinarily lucky in that sense of just being around a lot of really cool people. And to me, moments in time, like when you get to sit with Rick Rubin, even just sitting in a room with him for a couple of hours, you learn so much about not the music, but just perceptions of life and how he thinks of things,
right.
And that perspective of stuff. I learned so many things from Lem without him ever probably thinking he was ever teaching me anything, I guess, in a way. But just being around him makes you think of things differently, and it's just a really cool process.
The stuff Rick Rubin did with Johnny Cash was really great. Did you ever see the video? You probably have for God's Gonna Cut You Down. It's this black and white video. I think they made it after Johnny Cash died, where they have all these interesting people, and they have one of the guys from ZZ Top making these weird cameos.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, that stuff is crazy. And that Johnny Cash thing, so you talked about collaborating with Lemmy. So when Lem was really sick, he got really sick, and then probably a year or two before he passed, but then he kind of made a comeback. And to use wrestling terms, he kicked out, made a comeback, and then he did well for a while and before he passed. And so during that time when he was really sick, I saw him in L.A., and we talked to him about doing some covers. And the Rick Rubin, Johnny Cash stuff was an inspiration to me because I love the voice and the things that they did that were different so much.
Yeah.
That we sat in the back of the Staples Center and started talking about, hey, what if you did some covers? and we did this project together, and we'll promote it, and and he was really into it, and we had a deal created with the record label, and we started putting together a list of tracks, and I'll never forget it because Neil Lowy, our music guy, was in the room, and Lem at first was like, H, what do you mean? Like, what kind of music? And I'm like, Lem, some outside the box stuff, right? Like stuff that people would never think you would do, but yet your voice is so iconic that in those moments it's incredibly powerful. And I name off a couple of things, and then Neil goes, maybe even a rap track. And Lemmy's eyes bugged out of his head, and he was like, effing rap. I was like, Neil,
yeah, I got this here.
Stop. Yeah, like you're about to shut the whole deal down. Right?
He did good covers. Did you ever hear his cover of Shout It Out Loud, or a great one of Breaking the Law? Lemmy did great covers.
Oh, yeah, really good.
So interesting story, and this will sound like I'm trying to, and I'm not trying to take credit for anything here, but I'm just, it's because it's a fun story. And so we're sitting in that room, and one of the tracks I mentioned is Sympathy for the Devil. I said, and he was like, not a big Stones. Like, he's a big Beatles guy.
Yeah.
Wasn't a big Stones guy. And I'm like, man, to me, that song with your voice on it, Lem, like, you're the devil, right? Like, your voice, like, that is, I don't know. So I talk him into it. And it's the first one he does as that cover for this album that we were going to do that was all cover tracks. And he sends me a cut of it, like, I don't know, They go in and they record it a couple weeks later, and Todd, his manager, is sending us feedback like, dude, this thing is incredible. Everybody in the studio is freaking out about how good it is. Lem sends it over to me, and he leaves an entire verse of the song out, and I call him up, and I'm like, Lem, this sounds incredible, but like, you got to do the whole song, man. And he's like, the song is too long. I'm not singing the whole song. And I'm like, it's not the song. If you don't, everybody knows the song. You got to do the whole thing. Yeah. And, he's like, I'll think about it. And then Todd called, and finally he said, because you want him to do it, he'll agree to do it. So they did it. They finished it. And then, like, everybody was freaking out. I mean, they've used that thing for commercials, all that stuff. And the other song that we had on the list was Bowie's Heroes.
It would have been amazing.
No, he did it.
Did he?
Have
you heard that, Jim?
No, not Bowie's Heroes.
Oh, my God. So when we suggested it, we're in the room, and I was like, David Bowie, like, Heroes, you doing that song? He's like, I am not singing about dolphins. I'm not doing it. And I was like, Lem, rewrite the lyrics. Who cares? Like, put it in your words. But the song itself is so cool and iconic. And I could picture Phil doing it with the guitar. You got to listen to it. It's awesome. Lem rewrote the lyrics, and they did the track. They were supposed to do a whole bunch of them. And, towards the end, he knew. Right? He didn't know until he came back, and they told him, he went in because it was breaking down bad. And that's when they looked, they did the scan and said, dude, you got brain cancer. Like, you're done. Like it's shocked that you're here. And which shocking that he'd been here probably for the last 30 years of his life. Yeah. But he knew, that run on the end. And, like, he did those tracks, but then they ended up putting him out on, like, Sympathy he put out on Bad Magic, I think the last album they did. They did the Undercover album. I think that's where they put Heroes and stuff. But to the last, one of the last times I saw him, we did an interview with him. I asked him about doing an interview. I said, I didn't really say it in this manner, but I could tell. When I was talking to him, he was checking out. Not checking out in like he was off. Checking out in like, I'm at the end, dude. Like, when we would leave, might be last time.
Yeah.
So I asked him about doing an interview. And he said, yeah. And at that time, he wasn't doing anything. And I brought Corey Graves with me because Corey Graves is a fan. I needed like somebody to ask questions because Lem and I would go off on this tangent and never talk about anything interesting except something to he and I. And we went to the Rainbow. It was closed. They just put me, Corey, and Lemmy. We've never put it out yet, but it's one of the last interviews that he's ever done.
Wow.
Yeah, you should put that out.
Yeah, I can't wait to see that.
Yeah, it's something that we're talking about doing in this coming year. And we've just kind of been waiting for the right time, but it's one of the last interviews that he did, and it's I mean, it's amazing. But even at that meeting, so his manager Todd was there, and for like 20 minutes leaving as we're walking out, he is blistering Todd about the fact that they couldn't get all these covers on the album. And Todd is like, Lem, there's only so much space on a vinyl. Like, I can't put more stuff on there. I got to take a song off if you want to put another song on. And Lem is, I don't care. You're so full of crap. You could have got all these songs on that album, and it's bullshit. And he was so mad at Todd. We just talked about it the other day because they just sent me some stuff, and I was talking to Todd, and he was like, God, remember how mad he was at me for those covers not being on the album? And like, it was the funny. He dug the covers, and it was so, from a collaborative process, it was so like
that's amazing,
fun doing stuff with him and kind of getting, I don't know, getting his take on it and getting him outside of the box and doing stuff. It was a lot of fun.
Want more Jim and Sam? Catch up with full episodes and interviews from celebrity guests anytime on demand using the SiriusXM app.